Peace, peace, peace. How you guys doing? Uh, Welcome back to Piper Carter Podcast. I'm your host, Piper Carter. If you have come from my other podcast, which is Beyond Breaking Barriers on Black Power Media, this is my podcast over here on Piper Carter Podcast. Over there, I strictly talk about women in hip hop, and over here, I talk about a lot of different things, but primarily a cross section of environmental justice, Black liberation, hip hop, Black feminism, and where all those things intersect and get into each other. So, what's up, Sherry? How you doing? So today's last week, Sherry was on the show. If y'all didn't see that show, go check it out. There was a great episode with Sherry Smith, who has the Black Farm Finder app, and you want to check them out, all over the place. It's launching this week. Can you believe that app is launching this week? It's gonna be amazing. um yeah, so check it out, check it out. Today, if you see the showrunner, the title is Decoding the Roots of Social Learning, Understanding of Violence. So I think what I wanted to do as people come in, I wanted to kind of define what we mean by social learning. I want to get like right into it because I know people are like, oh, by the way, I do have an intro that I'm working on. Shouts out to P Groove, my husband, who made a beat for me that I asked him to make. And so that's done. And my cousin, Terrell, who is helping me edit my intro. So him and my husband are helping me edit the intro. They actually shot some things and created some things, and we're putting it together, and I'm going to edit it. So I hope to have this ready by Monday. I hope to have my intro ready by Monday. So by Monday I should have a pretty cool intro for y'all. So that should be cool. Um Shouts out to Rated M, who actually produced the beat for the intro to my other podcast, Beyond Breaking Barriers. That's on Black Power Media on Mondays at 8. So I'm going to be working off the computer today. So I'm going to be like looking at y'all and then doing some reading and then looking up and, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But again, like I said, I wanted to. Um, so we did a show a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about a situation that happened in our community. And so today I want to kind of just get a little bit internal around just understanding like a little bit about like what is social learning, and like a social learning and understanding violence. So there's a paper here. I'm always on academia.edu, like reading papers, because y'all know I'm like a hood intellectual. But so it's gonna be a lot of words today, less pictures, and we're digging into words that other people have written. So I'm gonna be going back and forth between like reading a little bit of what they wrote or a lot of bit of what they wrote, and then maybe like talking. So if y'all are in the chat, we can have a fuller discussion about it. You know what I'm saying? So, without further ado, hey, what's up, Embreeze? Thanks for coming over. You said you get notifications over here, but not on BPM. Huh? Or did you click the bell for BPM? You know, I'm in YouTube school, like I'm studying this stuff. I know I paid for one of those courses, but I've been doing a whole bunch of other different things in my life. So I said, let me let some people who figured all this stuff out show me some things about the algorithm. And something that I've learned and learning about YouTube, number one, the algorithm is always changing because they're always trying to stay ahead of us for some reason. Um, Another thing is that what I didn't know is that if you like all the people that are subscribed to you, I'm thinking that all these people, they're subscribed to you, so they're going to get your content. They don't even show your content to the people that are subscribed to you, right? it does this whole thing where the people have to be like looking for the content that you're like it's like they need to be looking for your content, then your content has to like find them because they're looking for it. It's really weird. And I thought that, oh, if you ring the bell, because I have mad bells that I'm subscribed to on other people's stuff, that it will like notify you. It doesn't always notify you. It's like you have to keep going to that person. You have to tell YouTube that you want to see that person's stuff. So you have to like keep searching for that person and keep going to their stuff and be in the bell. It's a whole thing, y'all. That um that's what it is today. They may change the algorithm tomorrow, not sure. But I'm gonna get into presentation mode. I'm gonna share my screen. I think I'm gonna go to this one and I'm gonna start sharing. Again, please forgive me. They didn't have any pictures, y'all. I like a lot of pictures with color. It's gonna be a lot of words today, but I'll try to go back and forth for those of us who are like, ooh, that's too many words. Mm, I'm drinking some water. Y'all know I love my water. That's my favorite drink. Water. hmm And so this is a paper. I'm trying to see what year. It says it's a 16-minute read. We'll go back and forth, like I said. This young person, Galliano Cosme, he's going to school. A lot of people who are going to school or are professors or in their masters or getting their PhD or they're a professor or they're tenured or whatever, or they're doing research, they put their papers up here on academia.edu. They're free. Uh, According to the rules, you just have to tell people who they, you know, who wrote them. So I'm accrediting it. So this is called Bandura's social learning theory. In the 1960s, the importance of direct reinforcement as a determinant of learning and behavior received significant acceptance within the scientific community of the time. So this is Skinner, 1953. However, the question remained as to how to explain learned behaviors within the social context. So Bandura, 1965, investigated a way of learning that extended beyond Skinner's traditional model and postulated that people also learn by observing another's behavior. As such, Bandura was the pioneer of the social learning theory. So Bandura in 1971 and Barron and Branscombe in 2016 and combined behavioral and cognitive principles to explain human behavior not sufficiently explained by conventional theories. So, according to an experiment conducted in 1961, Bandura submitted a group of children to observe two adult males, male, female, kick and punch a doll called Bobo while screaming. Bandura, Ross and Ross in 1961, an experimental group watched aggressive grown up models. Another group watched adult models that inhibited non aggressive behavior. And a third group, which was the control group, did not observe any model. The results indicated that individuals faced with aggressive models reproduce aggressive behavior similar to the models. So this outcome was different to those of people in the non-aggressive and the control groups. So Bandura affirmed that certain human behaviors are vicariously learned. So learning that comes from observing the behavior and consequences of others. This informed Bandura's theory of social learning. So Bandura's theory emphasized the importance of norms and social context in the development of social behavior and the related cognitive variables that describe and predict this behavior. So, for Bandura, humans have flexible forms of learning, namely, that learning can occur actively or by observation. Active learning occurs through direct experiments with the behaviors that are presented and their respective consequences. Therefore, learning occurs through a reflection and evaluation of the behavior's consequences. So these effects inform whether a behavior is strengthened or not, according to Feist in 98. Learning by observation refers to knowledge that is acquired through witnessing the actions of people who provide indirect vicarious experiences and reinforcements. Reinforcement can also influence people by watching a third person's outcomes. In this sense, Bandura points out that direct reinforcements are not essential to learning, despite providing motivating factors to enactment. So, according to Bandura, learning from observation is considered more efficient. It occurs through the process known as moderation, in which a cognitive process follows the observation. That is, human behavior is the result of a dynamic interaction of three principles: behavior, context, and cognitions. This implies that this type of learning is not a simple imitation, since it requires cognitive processing for everyone and situation. The modeling depends on the behavior's consequences, the characteristics of the observed behavior, and the observer. As such, this modeling process involves four steps. One, being attentive. Two, and perceiving the relevant aspects of the behavior. Two, recollecting the behavior also through words or mental images. Three, reproducing the observed behavior, which can improve with practice through visualization. And four, being motivated to adopt the new behavior. So Bandura posits that aggression has many determinants and different purposes, and that the social learning theory aims to provide an explanatory model to aggression. This theory describes aggression as behavior that causes damage to a person or property, and that the damage may take on psychological or a physical form. Bandura explains this behavior as the product of the mutual and continuous interaction between the individual and the environment. Specifically, Bandura says that aggressive tendencies are acquired either by observation or direct experience. The biological makeup of a person also informs the types of aggressive responses and the rate at which learning takes place. Linked to this are the numerous drive theories that suggest that aggression is a result of externality and externally elicited drives to hurt other people. That's very interesting. Observational learning of aggressive models does not occur automatically, since some people do not focus their attention on the essential features of the model or simply forget what was observed. The observed behavior must be represented by words, images, signs, or symbols to achieve some degree of memory. However, this is not enough to produce aggressive behavior. Aggression is mostly controlled by its consequences. If the effects are modified, the behavior may be subsequently influenced. Aggressive behavior has a unique functional value for everyone and may even vary within the individual depending on the circumstances. This approach openly rejects the nativist approach of human aggression, according to Skinner, that, it rejects that you're inherent, that people are just like certain people are inherently violent, and instead suggests that the origins of an individual's aggression are related to his or her social environment. Three important social systems may influence behavior, including aggressive behavior. These are family role models, subcultures, and symbols. The family refers to interactions between household members. The primary models here are parents, brothers, cousins, aunts, uncles, sisters, other relatives. These family systems link to various styles of attachment in children, according to Bowlby in 1988. There's also, well, I won't attribute, but I've heard of attachment. I think isn't that Freud has attachment, and also oh my god, I'm forgetting his name. I'm gonna have to look him up. So parents, as an example, are major shapers of behavior. From an aggression point of view, children can observe both the verbal language and attitudes between violent parents. Subculture entails the shared beliefs, attitudes, and customs or other forms of behavior dominant in society that people share in groups. If these people demonstrate aggressive or violent belief systems, children in the group may be influenced, which in turn may lead to the acquisition of aggressive tendencies. Finally, studies suggest that observation and direct experiences are not the only influences on violent behavior. Indirect stimulus, such as media and the internet, play a major role. This observed content can generate similar behaviors and beliefs about social life in those who come across it. That's according to Zilliman and Johnson in 1973. So, consequently, it is important to recognize the modeling effect media has as directors and shapers of behavior, particularly of children and youth. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to come back over here to the family. Oh, man. No one is in the chat. It's okay. So, I wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit. Mm. Because, you know, I guess that's so this article talks about the idea of social learning, right? And basically what it's saying is that our behavior is learned. The majority of our behavior is learned. Although we may have, there are different models or there's different understandings or there's different research that folks have done to say that people are inherently violent or certain people are inherently violent or certain races or certain people from certain regions are inherently violent. And this asserts that that people learn violence from witnessing violence and from experiencing violence and from from observing violence and from experiencing violence. So that's the general, but it kind of it was you could go back and listen, but it kind of breaks it down into the ways in which the ways in which it's categorizing that. So let me continue to read a little bit more. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So this is going into some modern research supporting social learning. So this is research that is saying that it supports the idea that that behavior is learned and not, that people aren't born like a certain way. So, one area of Bandura's theory that has received keen interest is the influence of television on social behavior. So, the response patterns thereof are graphic in nature and transmitted orally. In essence, behavior can be learned simply by watching social behavior on television. Now, see, they're doing research about this. Now, when we talk about this and people say, oh, no, it's just entertainment, here's some research right here. Okay, boom. Thank you. Bandura and Mischel, 1965, and Bandura et al., 1961, and Barron and Branscombe, 2016. Studies of the effect. Well, I mean, whatever. Anybody, I get it. I know my pushback will be anybody can study anything, and but anywho, today, I think we're about to get into this research. Studies of the effects of models presented by the media on children's behaviors have produced some important results for understanding aggressive conduct. So, that's as recent as 94 with Pike and Comstock, and as recent as 2001 with Bushman and Anderson. So it says it highlights the dangers of children and adolescents watching violent movies. They suggest that children may become less sensitive to other people's pain, might feel frightened, and can also behave aggressively after watching television programs containing many occurrences of aggressive behavior. Hello. These same researchers further note that children's programs often have up to 20 scenes containing aggression every hour. Other researchers have shown that exposure to television violence significantly increases interpersonal aggression. You can swap out television for video on a phone or, whatever, on an iPad, whatever. While video game. While research on social media's influence on nonviolent behavior is limited, evidence of its significant role in promoting violence, including stigmatizing target groups and recruiting agents of violence, is surfacing. Right? This is how do you say his name? Verbakel in 2019. He drew attention to many examples of social media being used to circulate hate and propel violence across many at-risk countries. So, Pattern in 2014 shone a spotlight on social media's role in advancing youth violence, including gang violence, bullying, and self directed violence. So, research by Melovi in 2020 concluded the considerable influence of social media on forging attitudes toward online violence. The seminal work of Maher in 2020 amplifies this concern by constructing a challenging connection between social media discourse and different forms of virtual and real violence. Video games have also been found to play a contributing role in violent behavior. That's according to Anderson in 2010, who observed an increase in aggressive behavior and aggressive effect among persons exposed to violent video games, along with decreased empathy and pro social behavior. So, Ferguson in 2009 further suggests that unhealthy family life increases the risk of violence among children who play violent video games. These findings are supported by Calvert in 2017, who noted in their research that exposure to violent video game content was linked to increased aggressive behavior and increased aggressive psychological features. Beyond media and technology, the sex of an observer and the model are important variables, with male children usually identifying with adults of the same sex, including those in groups, right? And thus, if a male child observes a father's aggressive behavior towards his mother and notices the rewards that the father has acquired as a result of behaving this way, the boy may begin to act out the same behavior towards other females. Note that it is not only the gender of the model, but the degree of importance that he or she holds concerning the observer, whether real or imaginary. I will say, unless we get further, gender, there's lots of conversations around gender, gender identification. Um, I guess I would want to understand, or we would have to see how this would, how this experiment would look, with young people who either don't identify with the gender or who don't identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth, or through a lifetime of, if the young person was assigned a certain gender, at birth, and then as a child started to develop into a different gender. Like, that research is not here. So for now, this model, we'll say, is a cis hetero based model, meaning uh cisgendered, heterosexual model, meaning that um is based on people who identify as the sex that they were assigned at birth, um and that, when I say hetero model, because it's um giving a more traditional model, of the way in which we talk about boys and girls. Boys looking up to men and girls looking up to women. So just naming that, just understand this is the this is the frame or the lens through which this model okay. Also too, this conversation does not dismiss the structural inequality of poverty, white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, misogyny, and capitalism, and all the things, right? And how that impacts poor people, people of color, black people, people in rural areas, um, people living under extreme poverty, people not living with their own parents, right? Young people that may live in institutions like juvenile facilities, or people living in prisons. So just giving that this is um, not necessarily that nuance in that framework, right? So just want to acknowledge all the things, because there's so many factors um to this conversation, that we could go in all these directions. And I'm reading the paper and just acknowledging, like, where the paper's coming from. Mm. So, while still considering social learning of children, older brothers and older friends play an important role. The work of Barr and Hain in '03 showed that despite the social contact with parents and other important adults during a child's cognitive development, adults are not the only people responsible for a child's learning. Young children can learn a broad array of new behaviors merely by observing and replicating the actions of other people. In a study highlighted by Barnhane, children aged 12 to 18 months learned 1 to 2 new behaviors a day by simply mimicking the observed behavior. Children who had older brothers and sisters also imitated, other youngsters more frequently, including those seen during playtime. So the quest for understanding childhood aggression from family structures and parental upbringing highlight the role of both the mother and father in the development of aggressive behavior in children. And that's according to Murray, 2014, Marler, Trainer, and Davis in '05. In a comparative analysis of understanding human behavior, the importance of the environment created by both parents is consistently evident. This suggests the high applicability of Bandura's theory to understanding familial dynamics and aggression. So finally, Bandura's work has led researchers to agree that his social learning theory has positively contributed to helping understand aggression and learning. And that's according to Dodge, Bates, and Petit in 1990. And this may support the notion that aggressive behavior is learned and strengthened, perhaps even encouraged, because of societal observations and the related cognitive processes. And in conclusion of this article, but I'm going to be keep talking. The main interest of this article was to understand violence and aggression from the perspective of Bandura's social learning theory. Across both the class study of social learning and more recent research, evidence exists to suggest a strong link between social observation, especially among youth, and aggressive behavior. The emergence of data supporting social media and social learning as key contributors to violent behavior indicates that more research is needed to understand violent behavior from the perspective, and perhaps most importantly, identify preventative interventions to mitigate the problem. So I'm gonna stop sharing right now. I'm gonna go back over here. So I wanted to talk about this. So man, there's so much I could say. I'll say this much: I'm in a lot of different spaces. Um, all the spaces I'm in are very black. They're black led, black created, black owned, lots of black membership, black leadership. And I'll say that's on purpose. And it's kind of been like that for a long time in my life, like on purpose. Um, just because um I had have always had um I don't know, a propensity to want to be in black spaces and, develop black people, whether they were black my peers or younger than me or whatever. But that's just been my thing. I've gone to all black schools, black college. Even when I was in the fashion industry, I, you know, went to the open mics and things and tried to be around black people before music and fashion kind of merged. So the conversations that I have are usually more than likely geared towards black people and black communities and specifically towards black women. And that's because a lot of the work that I do, I center black women and black youth, and that's just it's my interest and it's my I guess my expertise, but it's where I, choose to develop. And when I come to the microphone, this is, who I'm mostly talking to. I'm just, letting y'all know about that. So I wanted to um start to have deeper conversations on my podcast because I do a lot of interviews and I bring people in here and we have different types of conversations. I wanted to um be able to like, refer to like, some different pieces of research. I do a lot of research in my own time. I'm coming to the podcast with questions that, I have questions I ask myself, you know, when we did the show a couple of weeks ago about the incident, we left saying that, you know, we want to continue to grow ourselves and continue to grow in our understanding, and what happened, like we'll never like understand like what happened. We just won't. We can't be inside of a person's mind. We're not in their home. We weren't in their relationship. So for that specifically, I don't want to say like we're doing this so we could understand that. I will say though, and I prefaced all that about being in black spaces, maybe as a kid, because I was raised in the African Center community and I was raised by artists and I was very sheltered and all that. I had a very loving and warm feeling, even whatever I went through. I felt very held by my family, by my community. Um, and as an adult, being a person that works in community and works with a lot of black people, especially when I was doing things in the schools and being in community and owning my own community center, I'm noticing that a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of youth don't have, elders don't have, aren't held, don't have that kind of community. And what I'm speaking of is something that's deep inside my mind because I remember it. Because I'm not trying to suggest that no one is doing anything. Like that's not what I'm saying. I don't make that claim at all. There's people all over the place trying really desperately to do a lot. And there are people who are doing amazing things and there are people who are sharing and there are people who are giving. What I'm saying is we're still in trouble. Like our communities are in big trouble. On the one hand, we have all this technology, right? Like we've got all of this brilliance and at the same and access or whatever. And more of our people are, you know, uh I want to say like doing better, right? And our communities are failing, right? Our communities are it's rough for our communities, right? People in the first world, if you will. I mean, we don't use those terms, but one of the richest nations, that's going all over the world doing imperialism on people, continuing to, put us in wars and all this other stuff. And I guess it's for like our benefit and like our safety and for us to have all the comforts of life or whatever. And our people in our communities don't have access to food. Some don't have access to like fresh food, healthy food, or like any food. Don't have access to water, don't have a house, right? These are the conditions that are created so that people feel desperate, right, to survive. This is what creates violence, right? These conditions are what creates violence. So I'm very aware of that. That is very present in my face all the time as I do environmental justice, as you know, we keep saying and we keep talking about these communities we live in that were and are defunded and underfunded, right? Communities that had community centers in them, communities that had grocery stores in them, communities that had various businesses in them so that people could walk their community to get their needs served, that had a cleaners or a place that would fix your shoes or a place where you could shop for clothing, right? These were things that were like in our communities. My community that I live in doesn't have these things, okay? My community's been stripped of everything and my community is considered violent, right? That's what is considered. There's broken glass, there's glass broken glass everywhere, and there's an apartment building that sits on the corner and all the windows are blown out and it has been set on fire multiple times, to where it's uninhabitable. But even right before it was set on fire, when I was doing community cleanups across the street, the elders were like, you know help us, can you help us, because the street organizations have, the gangs have taken over. And I know one elder told me that he was getting sick because they had smeared feces on the wall and they just couldn't escape the smell, and they were coming in there and they were shooting up the place, and some of the people, were, they were forcing them to let them use their apartments to like sell drugs, and it's like this whole thing, right? And it's like the the progression should be that these elders are held, that they're taken care of, that they have their needs met, right? That people who are younger than them feel a sense of responsibility for their care, right? But because we have these conditions in our communities, there's a sense of rivalry among the different ages and across, you know, um, what I would say like the financial demographic, because I don't want to say that like, my whole community is like my community is elders who have been there a long time, own their house. Maybe they're in retirement, maybe they're not. It's kind of mixed. A lot of people left because they, like I told you, they destroyed my neighborhood, through closing our community centers, shutting down, cutting off the street lights, shutting off access to emergency services, cutting off people's water, putting people out of their homes, shutting down our high school, all the things, right? And so my community is still, shouts out to Bart McFarland, it's still 10,000, 11,000 people still live in a community. For the most part, though, it's not like people said, like, that's where I want to live. When I grow up, it's like most of the people can't leave, right? Like they can't leave. No one wants to buy their house and they don't have enough money to buy another house. So they're trying to make it work, right? That's majority of people. There's a lot of men that live in my community that's around my age, around 50. A lot of them have children, and a lot of them are like hustling and trying to figure out how to put $2 together. Um, There's a lot of single mothers, there's a lot of grandparents taking care of a lot of kids. So it's a very community, right? It's an African community to me. Um in the neighborhood there's a gas station on the corner, obviously not owned by anyone black. There's a like directly across the store from the gas station that sells like I think like chicken or something, or some type of chicken places inside there that sells like food, and it's like some sort of like fried meals that you can get in there. There's a gas I mean a corner store, like a liquor store, right? Like across the street on the other corner, and that's where most of the people go and get, you know, their food, which is like chips or a sandwich that's like in a wrap that has an expiration date, this type of thing. And or obviously liquor, blunts, whatever. And then on the other corner is a bank, and then on the other corner um is like this pig place that's got like a pig on it, and you could mostly the people drive through, but some people walk up. And so my neighborhood is like, I guess the scientific term for my neighborhood is like the block is hot, so there's lots of activity around my neighborhood, there's um some other things around my neighborhood, but uh there's like they just put a grocery store like not too far, but it's like down the other way, it's on the edge, not owned by black people. But part of me is like, well, at least we have a grocery store. But vegetables are very expensive, and everything in the hood is like 10 times more than like half the quality. But I will say at that grocery store is decent quality because I've been in there just to check it out because I'm nosy. I grow most of my food, but in the winter I buy my food. So I go there because it's convenient, they're kind, it's family owned, and I appreciate them, and they're Yemeni. So you know what I'm saying? Which the neighborhood that I live in is also mixed. So it's black and Yemeni. And so if you come like more down by my side, it's more like where the more black people live. But if you go down towards the other side, it starts getting more like Yemeni. You know what I'm saying? And there's the mosque is over there, and it's like the hood Yemeni, they're from Detroit. You know what I'm saying? They say, "What up, though?" They love Tupac. You know what I'm saying? It's like that. But I'm just saying that even that lack of like community that we feel with one another, right? Like I'm the type of person like I'm kind of social, I do social justice, but I do cultural organizing, but I just love people, you know, and I love, people's food and their music and all the things. And I just love learning. And so, I'm the type, I'm going to go in different neighborhoods and try different things. My neighbors, my black neighbors, not so much. So, even my neighborhood, even Detroit is so segregated that even when immigrant communities move in right, it's like the 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 consciousness is like, don't mix with the black people though. It's still the very anti-blackness, right? So it's still very physically segregated. So Detroit is the type of city where we know about the 8 mile segregation, but there's also like a tireman segregation or like a crash, so there's all these different segregations, like depending what part of the city you live in. Like even with Southwest Detroit, it's like Southwest Detroit is still like segregated. That's where lots of Latinx people live, Mesoamerican people live. I'll say like Spanish speaking Caribbean people live, as well as people from various Arab lineages live, right? Concentrated, right, within Southwest. Then you've got like if you go way on the east side, that's where you are gonna see more like the Hmong communities, or Chaldean communities, although not so much in the city anymore. So a lot of folks have moved out, but in general, that's where, and then if you go like, so Detroit has two cities inside of it. Highland Park is one city that we always talk about, but also Hamtramck. And they say that Hamtramck is the most diverse city um per like square foot like in the country, right? And then they named, I don't know, 200 languages that are spoken. It's very tiny. If it's inside of Detroit, so that tells you how tiny it is. But even in that, it's still like segregated. You know what I'm saying? At one time it was largely Polish, but now there's various communities that are there, from Bengali to Pakistani to um Yemeni. So, there's a lot of different cultures that are there, right? Um but anyway, hooty rooty tooty. Um I think I would call the level of segregation that we have in Detroit, I would call that violent. I would say that it's violent because it doesn't allow for people to connect. If you coming from a city like New York, right? Or even Jersey City, or shoot, even LA, but um the way in which Detroit is segregated is very intentional, is very stark. You've got the freeways, which most of the people who are not black or not of color live outside, and then they can just take the freeway, go to get in their cars, it's just by themselves, go to their job. They don't have to talk to anyone or see anyone, and then go back home. Whoever they connect with, that's who they connect with at work, and that's it. But it is across racial lines. I could hear my aunt saying, "But that's not only white folks." It is across racial lines, and it is um among a certain like class of people. However, by Detroit not being a walkable city, by Detroit not having public transportation, the starkness through which you can see the difference of the racial divide, and experience the racial divide. Like, you wouldn't meet anyone of a different race or culture, and you have to intentionally do this. I'm telling you this because I'm a person who has to intentionally. I do this. I intentionally meet people of different backgrounds, right? Because that's my interest. Like, I like it, right? But Detroit being a largely black city, I mean, you have depressed economy, you have where a lot of people, are making, like, I think they said something like $20,000 was like the average salary across like the city. So, I mean, that isn't of the like national standard, right? At all. It's not even close. I think like the national standard is like 40 or something like that. It's like, and the average Detroiter is living like way below poverty. Not only that, concerted efforts to close all these schools, they closed like 250 schools. Concerted efforts to shut off people's water. They shut off like 100,000 people with water. Concerted efforts to put people out of their homes. They had a whole couple of decades where they were doing those double mortgage scandals and people were losing their homes, right? So just the next thing on and then, like I said, communities like mine where they were trying to create the 9 healthy neighborhoods, and they were pushing people out. But I'm gonna get back to the conversation. I just wanted to highlight that within this conversation, because I think um one thing that we've been like those of us on the black left have been actively pushing against, is this notion of black on black crime, right? Obviously, people do crime where where it's easy, right? And people do like crime to people they know, right? It is familiar, right? Majority, majority. Okay, crime. I'm not going to use that word. Violence, right? I'm going to work on resisting that word crime. I'm going to say violence, right? And so, with those things in mind, also too, I'm not going to escape the reality that you know the grandmothers that live on my neighborhood, and I know because I knock doors, striving to get them, information that they need, and I knock doors in my neighborhood, listening to a lot of the people, I'm just using my neighborhood as an example, but in our neighborhoods that are like this, a lot of the elders say that they don't feel safe. A lot of the people don't feel safe. Like I talk to the dudes on the block. They say they don't feel safe, right? So they got us all afraid of each other. You know what I'm saying? We just looked at this research that talks about like this social learning of how we can learn violence from observing violence, right? Like whether that was experiencing it in our home, like we watched our parents, our siblings, outside, other peers, on television, in movies, in songs. America and the West is violent, very, very violent. The very nature of the origin of this country is violent. The project of America was a violent project, ripping people from Africa, demoralizing, dehumanizing, abusing them, unbearable, inhumane conditions to bring them over here. You know, all the atrocities that were committed against them, those that survived, many were murdered. Do you think that those souls aren't like haunting our shores here in Detroit? Detroit was ground zero for the Underground Railroad. I mean, in terms of once you get here, that's the Detroit River, and then you go to Canada, right? Can you imagine how many people passed away in their search of freedom, right? Um, they say there's a vortex of energy at Hart Plaza. Hart Plaza is a center that's at the very bottom of Detroit or beginning, whichever you want to. And they say that that's like a vortex of energy, right? There's Belle Isle that's there. There's a whole history of violence that happened on Belle Isle with our indigenous relatives there that were slaughtered, right? And here in Detroit from Cadillac. Um, and there was slavery in Detroit. There's a whole historical lesson that you could get from Baba Jaman Jordan around the history of slavery in Detroit. There's a history of resistance in Detroit, of Black liberation resistance in Detroit, right? Because people weren't just taking it, you know, and then all through the years, all the ways in which our people resisted, right? And again, I'm going to say our indigenous family that was slaughtered here, right? So there's a history of violence that's in the soil of Detroit, you know, that we've got to heal. We've got to heal that soil. I think a lot of this urban gardening and the urban farming movement and the Black food sovereignty movement. This is a lot of it is about reconnection to land and healing the reconnecting, um, and 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 building up the soil, right? Because think of how many decades that Detroit put the world on wheels. Think of the violence that happened to our land, our very soil here in Detroit. The violence that was done in putting the world on wheels, building the tanks. I just learned that there's still factories in Sterling Heights, which is like an eastern suburb of Detroit, where they're still building tanks. Detroit is a place where they built all the war tanks for all the wars. Fill in the blank, name a war. Okay. All the cars, right? Before that, Michigan, and Detroit, and over by Flint, that's where they did a lot of logging, right? So our rivers have seen lots of toxins poured into them, right? Our soil has had lots of toxins poured into it, and it continues to have toxins poured into it because we have had and continue to have leadership who believes that profit is more important than people. And so they'll allow these corporations with all their toxicity to have their factories and their dumping places right inside of residential neighborhoods. That is violence. That's called environmental racism. That is a violence. So when we're talking about the environmental violence and we're talking about like this social learning of violence, there's so much violence that we continue to have to deal with. The teachers are violent to our young people. I've been in the schools and struggled. Okay, there are some good teachers, but by and large, there's a lot of people who are very violent towards our young people, verbally violent, emotionally violent, demoralizing, dehumanizing, disrespectful. And it's a very toxic environment, a lot of these schools, um because it's just a perpetuation. And it's like, oh well, you have conversations, well, we have to have the police in the school, we have to have the metal detectors. These are things that are uh processes that are created for our babies. They're criminalizing our babies. They're saying that, we need to have police in the school for the 4-year-olds and the 5-year-olds because they're violent. They want to have them arrested, you know. Um, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I I do enjoy a level of violence. I like boxing. I like hip hop battles. You know what I'm saying? As long as there's spitting, you know what I'm saying? Um, I enjoy boxing. I enjoy martial arts. You know what I'm saying? Like, but those are, well, boxing is pretty savage. I'm not going to hold y'all. Like, we try to say that boxing is civil. It's pretty savage. Like, you can get brain damage, and let's just be honest. These promoters are not, don't have any integrity, and is run by the mafia, and it's some gangster stuff. It's just like the music industry. They're all married together. It's a whole capitalist system. It's terrible. I do like boxing though. I ain't gonna lie. Martial arts, if you do martial arts as a system to like heal yourself, it could be a thing. But then there's like the pro martial arts. That's a whole nother world that's also like but whatever. Anyway, I got off the subject. But what I'm saying is, I do think when I think about this concept of like social learning, right? It gives me hope that it's possible to like retrain ourselves and learn something different. I went on a tangent. I've been talking like a whole lot, and I'm gonna come on over here. Um and say peace up, Kipanga, um, Toronto. Hey, you said Toronto is segregated, right? And has 140 languages. Was very racist. Yeah, yeah. I used to have few clients in Toronto. I need to get some more, and I used to go there a lot. to shoot their campaigns, to work with them to do a lot of their campaigns, and for these independent clothing lines that are there, some black independent clothing lines that are there. And yeah, it's I love Toronto. Like, I love the T dot. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's a lot of diversity of food. I really appreciate that. I like that it's walkable, walkable communities. I appreciate that. And what happens with Toronto is so clean because it reminds you of like a clean New York. And people are so polite that you kind of forget that it's racist. So it's very easy for an American black person like myself to go there and be like, "Oh, Toronto is wonderful," and not really remember like, "Oh, snap, like it's a very racist place." Mm. So yeah, and peace Zay Crescendo. Yeah, you said for true, right? Yeah, cuz like if you come from this and then you go there and it's like you can get any kind of food that you want, and everyone's really kind. Not everyone, but everyone I encounter is really kind, and you're doing all this, you know, partying, and you feel safe-ish. But what's interesting about Toronto that kind of threw me off, I was feeling like super comfortable and safe, and my some people I was with was like, "Yo, we in the hood," and I was like, "Really?" And I was like, kind of downplaying. I ain't gonna lie, I was young. I was downplaying like, "Y'all ain't got no hood. Ain't no hood." Ooh, Toronto got hood, y'all. Toronto got hood. Me no know. Mm, nothing happened to me or anything. I just like witnessed like, ooh, you could feel the energy, and I was like, cause they, yeah. But anywho, the Rudy Tootie, you said the kindness is the okie dokie though. I feel you. Yeah. So I'm wondering, we've got like another 30 minutes. I want to hit another article. Um, this one is like really heady. This one, I found this other article, and it's like, it's called Hear My Cry: Breaking the Code of Silence Around Intimate Partner Violence Among Black Women in and Beyond Life. And um it's from a black woman. So it's Ingrid Waldron, Elayli Story McDougal, and Lori E. Weeks. And it's from the perspective of a uh is she Netherlands? I think she's from, it's a black woman. Is it from the Netherlands? Yeah, so I wanted to read a little bit um about it. Maybe I'll just deal with the abstract and then we can get into a little bit of the other part. But I definitely wanted to kind of dig into that part because I think so. We get a lot of comedy and tropes. I did a thing with about Cat Williams, and I was saying we get a lot of comedy and tropes in our, I mean, I'm talking about like black mainstream media that sort of normalizes violence to a point where it's comedic. And it's not funny, right? So we see our young people are, well, not just our, I don't want to make it like the children, because it's us too. Our society is inundated with so much violence, and it becomes difficult um to like try to get people to see that like this isn't good. Like, it's not funny, right? But any hootie Rudy Tootie, I'm gonna get a little serious on y'all just for a second. And I don't mean to bore y'all, but I found this interesting. I hope you do too. Like I said, this is 2021. It's from Atlantis Critical Studies in Gender, Culture, and Social Justice. This is some research by Ingrid Waldron, Elayli Story McDougal, and Lori E. Weeks. It's called Hear My Cry: Breaking the Code of Silence Around Intimate Partner Violence Among Black Women in and beyond life. It's pretty long. It's a pretty long article. Let me see. Like, you see all that? I don't know if I'm gonna read like the whole thing, but I'm gonna try to skip around a little bit and maybe go to some of the important parts. So if we go to the abstract, it says there is a knowledge gap about how the intersections of gender, race, culture, age, income, social class, and other identities shape Black women's experiences of intimate partner violence. In this qualitative study, we utilize an intersectional approach to examine how interpersonal violence is experienced and managed by racialized women. And in particular, our focus was to explore the interpersonal violence experiences of Black Nova Scotian women in and beyond midlife and their experiences of seeking support. Participant recruitment was predictably challenging, but we were able to collect in depth interview data from a Black woman who identified as being in and beyond midlife and who had experienced intimate partner violence in the past from three people who provided support to Black women in a paid capacity. An interpretive narrative approach was utilized to identify five dominant themes: descriptions of experiences of intimate partner violence for Black women, strategies for coping with intimate partner violence, strategies in supporting Black women in experiencing intimate partner violence, barriers in accessing support, and challenges in the delivery of support. The knowledge gained through this research provides important insights about the experiences, barriers faced, and how to address these challenges for Black women who experience intimate partner violence in and beyond life. Um, so I don't want to read their stories so much because I don't want to traumatize people. Um, but let's go to their theoretical framework. So it says in this paper, we're using an intersectional narrative approach to examine how race, culture, and immigrant status and class shape interpersonal violence is experienced and managed by Black Nova Scotian women. Indeed, Black and other racialized women's location at the intersection of interpersonal violence and state sanctioned racial and gender violence provides them with the unique understanding of a oops, sorry, with the unique understanding of approach to dealing with their experiences of interpersonal violence. In this article, we use the term racialized to refer to non-white people who experience overt and or systemic racism based on skin color and phenotypic features. And we recognize that the process of racialization is one in which racial hierarchies are embedded within our social institutions in ways that determine the extent to which we are able to access various resources. Race developed over the years as a principle of social organization and identify formation and has been used to categorize, to include, and to exclude people based on physical traits. Systemic racism refers to how racial hierarchies become entrenched within our social system, resulting in the unequal distribution of resources, such as the denial of access, participation, and equity to racialized people for basic needs such as education, employment, and housing. It manifests in the policies, practices, and procedures within our systems that may directly or indirectly promote, sustain, or entrench differential advantage or privilege for people of certain races. Therefore, as Hicken and colleagues observe, racialization is the process by which social meanings are attached to the constellation of biological, phenotypic, or otherwise observable features. This paper also uses the concepts of state sanctioned racial and gendered violence to expand the concept of state sanctioned violence and pinpoint the specific ways in which government policies and decisions harm or otherwise disadvantage racialized women, preventing them from meeting their basic needs and rights related to employment, income, healthcare, and other resources. Racialized women's experiences of state violence are specifically shaped by their location at the intersection of race and gender, and consequently, their exposure to gendered or racialized inequalities. For Black women, trauma is specifically experienced through their exposure to race and gender based violence, including the violence of homophobia, transphobia in their relationship to the state and social structures, and additionally, in their intimate and other personal relationships. And then they go into some examples and um so, although there continues to be a gap in research on racialized women's experiences of interpersonal violence, studies have been emerging in recent years. So further research on the experiences of racialized women in Canada who suffer interpersonal violence is needed in order to inform culturally sensitive practices. The focus in this study is Black women's experiences of interpersonal violence, and we refer to sources focusing on Black women in the United States as African American women, Black women of the Caribbean heritage residing in Canada, and Black women born in Africa who reside in Canada. We recognize that the cultural context within these Black women's experience and address interpersonal violence will be different given the differences in historical, political, social, and economic context between Canada and the United States. We argue, however, that these women's shared experiences of state sanctioned racial and gender violence in these white dominant societies provide a fundamental analytical entry point to highlight how race and gender intersect in ways that not only create barriers to help seeking among Black women in white dominant societies, regardless of cultural context or residence in Canada or the United States, but also have implications for considerations that need to be made in providing services that meet the needs of Black women. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I'm gonna go back over here. So I think that is a I think like as we move forward, we really need to we meaning those of us on the Black left, I think like something that we do need to do a lot more of. I think the ADOS people and the B1 people and the FBA people, I'm not talking about the stuff they're talking about. I'm gonna say I'm a Pan Africanist, which means that I'm for all Black life. Continental Africans, those in the Caribbean, those Spanish speaking, francophone, French speaking, Portuguese speaking. The Black people that are over, in various Asian nations, and the Black people everywhere across the diaspora. So, um, I think that us on the Black left need to have a more nuanced conversation about the differences that we experience culturally in a way that allows us to get at the nuances of how white supremacy has landed on us, how white supremacy and capitalism has landed on us, and how we contend with all of it, right? What I mean by that is, I'm gonna give some specific examples. I have a sister friend who would be classified as an immigrant, although she's become a citizen and has a green card, and she's from Africa and she's Muslim. She's been on my podcast plenty of times. When she tries to ask for support, or when she asks for support People support her, right? Because they like her. She's become a part of the community. They think she's cool. But in general, I think in the black community, we don't necessarily support her as well as we should. Should is an interesting word. I when I spoke before about how segregated Detroit is, there's a lot of indoctrination of Americana into black Detroiters as well. So while a lot of black Detroiters will identify with like maybe being from the hood and the ways in which they wouldn't admit it, but I'll just say the ways in which capitalism has not served them well. Although many of them would say um that they probably love capitalism. But there's a definite divide between like types of black folk. There's already like a financial or like a economic divide or like a class divide. You've got people that, are like so-called middle class and they have like a regular job and they have a regular salary and they have benefits and they, can pay to send their kids to college and maybe they own their house or, this kind of thing. They drive a decent car, but they still live in the city, that's a thing. I told you, like, majority of the people live below the poverty line, got 2, 3 jobs, trying to work it all out. May own a house because it got inherited to them, maybe renting a room in a house, maybe renting a house, maybe, all the phases of that. Then you got another class that is like, I'm not trying to live near none of y'all. I'm going out here where all these white folks are because I'm trying to be safe and cool and and I want y'all to think that I'm somebody, so I'm out here. And I think we talk about those differences a lot, but I don't think we talk enough about the differences of people who are second generation or first generation or people who have migrated here who are black and have certain experiences. I think the ADOS conversation and the FBA and the B1, that conversation is very rooted in Americana. And those people will say things like that immigrants have all the resources and they don't need any help or all types of fictional things, right? It is also true, not just black immigrants, but all immigrants are taught when they come here to stay away from black Americans. They're taught to stay away from us. Right? And so a lot of immigrant communities when they come here, they don't move into a lot of black immigrants when they come here, they don't move into black communities. I'm saying Detroit because in New York, they move they move into black communities. But I'm talking about in Detroit. And a lot of black immigrant people don't move into black communities because they're told to stay away from black Americans. And there is a divide, a physical divide, because a lot of people who identify as being an immigrant or from an immigrant community don't know or live around or, are not infused in like the black neighborhoods or the black communities, right? On purpose. And so there is that divide. So if you're, I'm gonna say like average kid from Detroit, you grow up going to school, everyone is homogenous. Everyone else is like grandparents came here from the South or, X amount of generations are from like, these parts of the Americas. You know what I'm saying? And the only language you speak is English and maybe your other language is Ebonics or something, you know what I'm saying? And so there is, and then even in the communities that we live m- in black communities in Detroit, immigrants don't have businesses in general, right? I could count the Jamaican restaurants that are in Detroit. I could count them, right? And they're all on one hand. I can count them. We don't have a Trinidadian restaurant. We don't have a Guyanese restaurant. We have a lot of Bengali restaurants. although Bengalis wouldn't identify as black. But we have uh one no, we have like maybe three to five Senegalese restaurants, but they're all over the place. I think maybe one or two is in Detroit. We've got do we have any Nigerian? I don't know. We've got a couple Nigerian stores. We have a couple African hair braiders. Not we have a lot of we have a lot of African hair braiders. A lot of African hair braiders. A lot of them are Senegalese or francophone French speaking. Um I'm trying to think of like, okay, we have one restaurant they're from Burundi. Um but in general, we don't have like, I mean, we got to, and this is could be contested. Um we don't have Puerto Rican restaurants. I think okay, we may have one, but even one of the ones I'm thinking of is owned by a Dominican that's married to like a Salvadorian. Or I think, yeah. So it's like in Detroit, if you obviously New York is a lot of culture like all over the place, right? That's funny, Kipanga. No, really. So Detroit doesn't have even like the surface level diversity of like eating other people's food or like noticing another person's flag or like hearing another person's language, right? And that same thing exists across the black communities in Detroit. And the Spanish speaking black communities are not embedded in black communities. French speaking black communities are not embedded in black communities. Um Portuguese black communities are not embedded in black communities. And so, you know, you could be a black person from Detroit and like never hear another language, never taste another food besides soul food or, you know, Chinese food, which isn't even like real Chinese food. Right? And I mean, I'm saying food is so surface, although food is very important to me. But I'm saying like that's even on a surface level, we don't even have that. You know what I'm saying? We don't even have that. I'm just saying I think it would serve us well to um begin to explore number one, the possibilities of what it looks like for us to even um have conversations with one another so that there's less fear of one another. We could just start with that. Let me see, it's 9:23. I'm going to read a little bit more. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the crimes against humanity that happen to black people, to black women, it's not just relegated to the United States, right? It's not just relegated mm, to what we would consider like third world nation. Here's black women in Nova Scotia, right? Um, talking about this violence. And I want to reiterate the West is a violent place. And so um it breeds a violent culture, right? So I'm gonna read a little bit more. I'm gonna share a little bit more of this. And again, I'm not gonna traumatize y'all with specific stories right now. We'll do that another time. So, researchers have examined how Black women who experience interpersonal violence are often examined as a monolith, since the literature fails to address the very different ethnic and cultural backgrounds and stories of Black women. Since Black women experience marginalization due to race, gender, and the feminization of poverty. What does that mean? An analysis, oh, the feminization of poverty, meaning that how many women are made poor. Um, an analysis that acknowledges Black women's intersectional identities is important if we are to understand their unique experiences of interpersonal violence and the challenges they face accessing support. Black women's experiences can be characterized in terms of their structural location at the crossroads of race, gender, class, age, sexual orientation, and other social oppressions. Also contributing to the challenges which Black women face reaching out for help is the strong Black woman trope, a cultural phenomenon that places unreasonable expectations on Black women to be nurturing and supportive figures in their families and communities, often resulting in the undermining or dismissal of Black women's vulnerability. Etowa and colleagues observe that Black women in Eastern Canada felt a pressure to be the backbone of the community by taking care of all family members, putting the needs of others before themselves, being self sufficient and invulnerable, and being willing to sacrifice and take on limitless burdens. The characterization of Black women as nurturing, strong, invulnerable, and resilient superwoman is deeply rooted, and it serves to undermine the racialized physical and mental trauma that Black women have long had to endure, often causing them to internalize this damaging stereotype, as well as maximize, ignore, or deny the many challenges they face, including interpersonal violence. Black women's internalization of the strong Black woman stereotype as a central component of Black womanhood can be harmful to their well being because it promotes a perception of Black women as having excessive strength, caretaking abilities, and emotional restraint, and consequently may be detrimental to their self care behaviors, especially in the case of interpersonal violence where they may be less likely to seek support. I'm going to stop sharing right there for a second. Um, so Kipanga says crimes against humanity that happen to Black people begins with Black women. Yeah. I'm going to read a little more. Read a lot more actually. This is from Hear My Cry, Breaking the Code of Silence. Um So, when it comes to Black women seeking support for interpersonal violence, studies show that Black women are less likely to seek support for their experiences of interpersonal violence than white survivors and are often unaware of unavailable resources. Saintville and colleagues found that Black women utilize three types of survivor strategies: internal strategies of faith and religion, interpersonal strategies of leaving the abuse, and external reliance on informal or formal supports. Many Black women reported relying on the church community and friends and family for support, while only some looked for support from organizations that specialized in supporting women who experience interpersonal violence. Other studies indicate that although Black women are hesitant to use legal resources, they are more likely to access them when there is a high risk for lethality. Compared to white women, Black women are also more likely to seek medical treatment due to the seriousness of interpersonal violence. Black women are also less likely to access counseling and other professional supports because of a fear of contributing to racist and negative stereotypes of Black men and Black communities as inherently dangerous. So, where do we go from here? And dangerous. Okay, so racialized women in and beyond midlife. and interpersonal violence. In this article, we focus on older women. There is no consensus in interpersonal violence research on the specific age at which a woman is considered older than midlife. Typically, researchers include women who have at least reached the age of 50, which is sometimes described as midlife or older than midlife. We believe that referring to women in and beyond midlife classifies our population of interest as women who are not caring for dependent children, while our knowledge is far less complete on interpersonal violence among older versus younger women. Mistaken assumptions are that women of all ages experience interpersonal violence in similar ways, and that interpersonal violence ceases with old age. Prevalence studies show that between 15% and 30% of older women report interpersonal violence at some time over their life. In a Quebec study of coroner's files of homicide victims aged 65 and older, reports that 89% of the victims were female, and of these, 93% were current or former spouses of male perpetrators. It is recognized that, like other types of abuse, interpersonal violence among older women is underestimated. Research examining interpersonal violence among older women from various racialized groups is very limited. So, most studies include ethnically homogenous samples of predominantly white participants, or they include more diverse participants, but the results are not presented by racialized groups. An abused woman may have varying needs based on race and ethnicity. Understanding the needs of specific groups of women is important, including women in and beyond midlife. Additional research is needed that focuses on the service needs for older racialized women experiencing interpersonal violence. Mm. So they go into the methods that they did to do their research and their procedures, and where they did the research and who the participants were. And then they go into their data analysis, like how they, analyze their data, and then they get into their results. And then they go into like some very detailed stories, and then they go into um strategies for coping with interpersonal violence and strategies for supporting women experiencing interpersonal violence. And they go into barriers to accessing supports. They address challenges to like being able to deliver services, and then they give um some discussion about that, and then they cite the work. So I think what I want to do, well, first I want to stop sharing for a second. I want to go back to the chat, see where y'all are. Okay. So I'm thinking what I might want to do. I think I'll go back here and get back to this uh share screen for the Hear My Cry article. Um let me see. I just want to make sure I don't um let me see. Well, this is kind of talking about one woman and what she did. I think what I want to do, there are the challenges to serving. Some of this they've already, so most of this they've already named about needing like cultural competency is needed. Um, that there needs to be a awareness about what the services are, that people need to be aware of like race and gender. and identity, um, as well as like trauma informed care and these kind of things. So we kind of touched on a lot of that type of stuff. So I think I'm gonna stop sharing right here, and I think I'm gonna get ready to end the stream like right around here. So what did you say? You said Kipanga says a black heterosexual male. I'm guilty as charged of these humanity crimes. Forgive me. I'm working through these challenges. I mean, it's it's a lot of us that are relearning. Like all of us are relearning. Everyone's relearning. All of us. We're learning how to communicate. We're learning how to communicate our needs. We're learning how to communicate our frustrations, our conflicts. You know, um, the colonizer did and the imperialists did a job on us. They did a good job colonizing us, right? Americanizing us and stripping us of our true culture and our humanity. So many of us have adopted the American way, right? Which is violence. And so as we're all relearning how to connect with our humanity, how to be our full and complete selves, how to, you know, address one another when we have conflict, how to lean into conflict and listen more and lean into conflict with more curiosity as opposed to aggression, right? There's lots of strategies that we're all, actively relearning, um, so that we can, you know, be better together in community, right? There are several models that that are trauma informed, that are African centered or based in our indigeneity, or help us get back to the land, like I said, and help us understand who we are. There's cultural practices. For me, I'm interested in learning a lot of the practical practices, if you will, like how do you how do you apologize? How do you show up when you wrong someone and they still want to deal with you? How do you show up for them? How do you acknowledge that you were a harmer or that you've done wrong, right? Sometimes we don't know how to deal with our aggression. How do you tell someone that you're angry with them and you still want to be in a relationship? Not whatever type of relation, whether a friend or a coworker, colleague, or intimate partner, right? But how do you tell someone that you're angry, right? A lot of us have experienced abuse and violence, and so when people come to us and tell us that we're angry, the first thing we do is we tense up and we're ready to fight because it's like right? And so we got to learn how to lean more into our conflict so that, like, we could, like they say, lean in with curiosity so that we can actually try to hear, if we're the harmer, what this person is saying, like how we've harmed, right? And then show up differently, and then ask this person how do they want us to show up differently, not be like, well, this is what I'm going to do, um being curious all around, being humble. Being humble doesn't mean like going around, yeah, that's not humility. Humility is being able to step back and say, like, wow, like I think I messed up. And sit with that for a second. Like a lot of times people get aggressive because they don't want to sit with the fact that they're not right or that they're wrong, or they don't know how to just be like, wow, I need to chill. Like I messed up. Like I'm not doing this right now. I'm not doing this correctly in this moment. I need to do something different. Like, or I mean, another thing that we do is we egg other people on. Girl, you gonna let him talk to you like that? You gonna let her talk to you like that? Bro, you gonna let him talk to you like that? Bro, it's like we gotta show up for each other differently. We can't encourage each other to be like about the mess. Something I really love about my husband, cause like I I sometimes have a little. streak of temper, and I get a little feisty. And something I really appreciate about him, I mean, so much I appreciate about him. One thing I'm going to share, I appreciate that he knows that he is always striving to understand me. He is always striving to listen to me. He's always striving to do better than he did the day before. He's always striving to show up for me in the ways that I need him to show up for me. He's always striving. And when I get a little feisty, not towards him, like I might be upset about something, right? This happened, that happened, and I'm hands and feet jumping all over the place. Can you believe it? Rah, rah, rah. He's always the one that's like, babe, what's your role in that? And my first inkling is like, I'm not wrong, they're wrong. And my first, or he might be like, maybe you could show up a little differently. How could you show up differently? Like, and I'll be like, they did me wrong. They did this, they did that. And he'll be like, you know what, babe? Then maybe they are going through something. Or it'll be something like that. Or it'll be like, maybe those aren't people you need to like be with. Or maybe the creator is just telling you it's time to move on. Or if you're that frustrated, or he'll be like, um, he always shows up in a different way, but it's always this different perspective. And it doesn't negate my anger, because something that I'm actively working on is my own anger, and knowing that I have a right to be angry, and leaning into my anger in a healthy way, because I also think that is very necessary for us to lean into our anger in positive ways, right? Where we acknowledge our anger, where we acknowledge our rage, where we acknowledge, I think that's a healthy part, because that is a part of us as well. I think it's when we turn that onto ourselves and one another, and that's the part where I'm thinking like, where I want to learn how to do that much better. Like, I want to learn it, and I want us all to learn it. But anyway, I'm gonna kind of what did you say, Kipanga? You said heart of love, lean in with curiosity. Incredible show with my Dukes last week's too. Huge Dilla fans and T Dot. Hey, so thanks for checking out the My Dukes. Um, I could go on and on about that, but yeah, that's another example of like leaning in with love and curiosity and forgiveness. So, um, I think I'm gonna land the plane here. I thank all of y'all for sticking with me this long and listening. Just want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. I'm gonna have my show opener and closer next week with my beat and my, you know, editing and all that stuff. This has been the Piper Carter podcast on Detroit is Different Podcast Network. Show support. Go into the description. You can see all the ways in which you can get in touch with us. We got the collard green cookout coming up in August. I'm gonna keep reminding you about this collard green cookout, because if you think you have the best collard greens, then you need to come on and apply and see, and let's see what you're working with. All right. So once again, appreciate y'all. Appreciate everyone for showing up, and all of y'all for listening. Y'all have a great week. I'll see you next week, Tuesday, 8 p.m. right here. Piper Carter Podcast. Detroit is different. Peace.